He's going ham.
Yeah.
Everybody can get their sign your checks, send them in. Let's go.
Wow.
Wow. Possession of child pornography should
Yeah.
be like, you shouldn't be able to pardon for stuff like that. It's like, there's certain things. It's like, come on.
You know, I spent almost 8 years in prison for politics, not for crimes. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have about any of it because I didn't do it. It was all politics. But the first 3 years, almost 3 years, they put me in a higher security prison, and I'm in there with Crips and Bloods and Gangster Disciples and Sinaloa cartel drug dealers.
Why would they do that?
They were squeezing me and pressuring me because they wanted me to basically say I did something that I didn't do. They wanted me to plead guilty to non-crimes.
So they want to scare you by putting you in with dangerous people.
Yeah, and they really punished me because I fought back in a way that no one really does except for Trump. I mean, I was fighting back when they brought those charges against me everywhere, and I was calling them criminals, and they
What
are.
did they expect you to do? They expect you to just take a sentence, a lower sentence,
Right.
and confess?
Exactly.
What did they offer you?
They tried me twice after the first trial where they failed to convict me on their fake corruption charges. They were floating 18 months. And, you know, there were a lot of people in my team, like my lawyers, who thought that might be the prudent thing to do because you really can't beat these people. The system is rigged. And when they really want to get you, they'll just keep trying you, and they'll get their judge to work with them, and they'll ultimately convict you as they did me by using unlawful standards to criminalize things that are legal in politics and government. So the prudent thing, the safe thing, was to, you know, cut your losses and, you know, take the short period of prison time. But I felt, you know, I wasn't a businessman. I suppose if I was a businessman facing something like that, you'd make a business decision, you cut your losses, you realize they're bleeding you financially, you can't afford lawyers, this is going to be an endless thing. It was already 3 years at that point that we had been fighting it. But I was the governor, twice elected by the people. And, you know, I know these oaths don't mean a lot to some people. It sounds like a bunch of bullshit to say I swore on the Holy Bible as the governor to preserve, protect the rule of law, the Constitution. I just couldn't do it. And I knew it was all bullshit. It was all corrupt. They knew it was all corrupt. And it was all an effort to try to get me to admit it. And if I admitted it, then the truth would never come out. They could never be exposed for what they did. And because I wouldn't do it, and I fought back, because if I'm right, and I know I am, and they were doing to me what they ultimately ended up doing to Trump, weaponizing their uncontrolled power and unlimited resources to criminalize political things. If the truth comes out, they're going to be facing some sort of accountability, hopefully one day. And hopefully now with the new administration, they'll reform the laws. And
Well, we saw that the head of the FBI just stepped down.
Yep.
And Kash Patel is going to come in, and he wants to clean house. Well, let's take it back to the beginning. So I know they were bugging your phones, but you kind of knew they were bugging your phones, right?
You know, when you come out of Chicago politics, which is a politics that probably has a larger proportion of corruption than
That's how they got JFK elected.
Other places,
right?
Yeah.
The mob was involved in that.
Yeah, that's well done. The River Awards made the difference. Mayor Daley, the first Mayor Daley, was holding back the counting of those votes until he saw what Southern Illinois Republican area came up with. And once those votes were counted, then he let those River Awards come out. And Giancana, people like that, were really instrumental in electing Kennedy. And then when Bobby Kennedy started going after Giancana, as the Attorney General, they felt betrayed.
Rightly so.
Yeah, of course. But
a deal's a deal, right?
I mean, apparently the father made the deal, right?
Yeah.
But with me, it was, I always felt that there was a possibility that not only would they be listening, but that somebody would set you up. And through the years in politics, people would. They'd come to you and offer you things that you knew were illegal. And you didn't do it because it was illegal. But also you felt this could be a setup. This could be the FBI trying to entrap you into doing something.
And that's a common thing.
Not an uncommon thing.
So when what was the first charge that was brought against you? Or if you could just bring us back to the moment when you knew they were coming after you.
I was elected the first Democratic governor in Illinois in November 2002 after 26 years of Republican governors. I first learned that they began to look into my administration and people around me in December of 2003. And I had been governor for 10 months, and they were already looking. And I knew it, which meant we got to be extra careful because these people are scrutinizing us. On the one hand, I felt good. That puts pressure on people around me, and people are doing work for me to do the legal things and not cross lines. I never imagined that the FBI and the Department of Justice and these U.S. attorneys who come out of the best schools would be so corrupt and dishonest. I felt like, okay, they'll look and see how we do things, and if we make some mistakes along the way, we'll make adjustments. So they chased me for 5 years. And by the time they taped my phones, it was no surprise. There was all kinds of pressure at that time because they'd gotten a guy who was close to me and Obama, a guy by the name of Tony Oresco, who they probably convicted him of things that weren't crimes either. They were squeezing him to say things about me and Obama. He wouldn't do it. They put him into solitary confinement for 3 years to get him to invent crimes against us. He wouldn't do it. This guy's a stand-up guy. Obama sold him out, and he did more for Obama than he ever did for me. But I knew all of that. And so at the time when they began wiretapping my phones, which was late October 2008, everything I talked about doing with regard to the appointment of Obama's successor to the United States Senate, I felt it was very possible they were listening. How could they not? Because they were chasing me. They so much wanted to get me. And Obama and I both were in their crosshairs in the very beginning, but I think the politics of it changed as his political fortunes improved, and he looked like he was going to be the next president. And these people, these U.S. attorneys, get appointed by the president. And these were Bush-appointed, Cheney-appointed prosecutors. And it's very unusual that the previous administration's prosecutors stay in office. When the new president comes in, they leave, as you see with Trump and the other parties, people come in. But these people stayed in, and when they arrested me, what they wanted me to do was to basically say that I was guilty of trying to sell a Senate seat, and I was trying to sell it to another guilty party, who was the guy who started the whole thing, by the name of Barack Obama, who wanted to buy that Senate seat, because that's where the whole thing began. It was Obama on election night. He sent an emissary to me to suggest a political deal because he wanted this woman named Valerie Jarrett to be appointed to his Senate seat. The governor appoints the senator.
Pause for a second. Hold that thought. Jamie, there's feedback. You hear that? You hear that vibe? That it was on the last podcast too. Really? Yeah, it's gone. Just ended. All right. What was that? My mic cord is touching something. Yep, that's it. Okay. All right, we're back. This episode is brought to you by The Farmer's Dog. Dogs are amazing. They're loyal. They're lovable. Like, just having Marshall around can make my day 10 times better.
At night,
applicable for new customers only. So Obama was. So how did he try to negotiate? Like, when he wanted this person to take his Senate seat? Like, what was said? How did it go down? How do things like that work?
You use third parties, emissaries.
So that you're not.
People.
So he doesn't have to meet with you. So you can say Obama asked me. You have other people. So there's plausible deniability.
To some extent, that's part of it, of course. But there's other dynamics that also. It's just a little bit easier to kind of test the mood of the other person if you have a third party who both of people like or respect. In this particular case, it was a labor boss by the name of Tom Balanoff. He came up to me election night in November 2008. That was the election you voted for Obama. You and I are both guilty of that. And I was there that night. Chicago was magical, historic. And it was great in the sense that finally America, crossed a significant barrier. A black person can be elected president of the United States. Every black child growing up can now look and say, one day maybe I can be that. There's the American dream and opportunity. So in that sense, it was a beautiful thing. So this Balanoff guy comes up to me and he says, Barack called me last night. He said I was pumping gas in this gas station in the South Loop area downtown Chicago. Barack called me last night. He said it was around, he even told me the time, like around 6:30 or 7 at night. And he asked me to come to you. He would like you to appoint Valerie Jarrett as his successor to the Senate. He wanted me to know what you want. I wonder if I can come and see you so we can discuss this. I said, sure, call me tomorrow. Now, that's totally legal and appropriate. He's not suggesting anything illegal. Obama just wants to make a political deal. But what happened was they criminalized it against me. And
so they criminalized Barack Obama trying to force his pick for Senate seat and you accepting it.
Obama wasn't trying to force it. He was trying to make a deal to persuade me to do it.
Or what would you get out of that?
That's what we discussed for 6 weeks, and the FBI was talking about that. And we discussed all kinds of crazy ideas, a lot of good ideas. Spent 2 days talking about the possibility of appointing Oprah Winfrey.
What?
You might appreciate this. Yeah, I know. She's from Chicago. And
do you remember when Trump won? There was like, it was NBC or one of these fucking people tweeted out, "This is our president," and it was Oprah.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
no.
See if you can find that. One like a major network tweeted out, "This is our president."
Wow.
I was like, okay.
So we spent 6 weeks talking about all kinds of ideas because this was, to quote me, fucking golden. I'm not giving it up for nothing. We got a chance to do something with this. And all of these ideas and thoughts were discussed with my governor's lawyer on all those calls, largely because I knew these people were chasing me, and I wanted to be sure whatever decision I made, it was legal. We didn't cross lines or make a mistake, and maybe I missed something. And, this was unique, and so I explored all kinds of ideas. I even spent one conversation, I think you might appreciate this. They played this at court in my first trial, and my wife's sitting there, loving, dutiful, devoted, faithful wife, sitting in a courtroom every single day at both trials. And the media's in there every day. And they could do whatever they want, these prosecutors. The judge was their guy. And so they're playing all these tapes out of context. They're not allowing me to play tapes we want to fill up the context. They only played 2% of the tapes. They denied 98% of them. To this day, those tapes are covered up because all kinds of people are on those calls. There wasn't anything illegal about it, but, Rahm Emanuel, Harry Reid at the time was the Democratic leader, every possible big-time Democrats on those calls with me. But to go back to some of these crazy ideas, I was trying to appoint someone who was black but not in politics. I was looking for a military hero of some sort. Everybody wanted me to make them senators, you can imagine, in politics. I wanted to think outside the box, and we were testing all these ideas, including Oprah. And then I'm talking to my lawyer, Quinlan, and I say, hey,
Here
Quinlan.
It is, NBC. Nothing but respect for our future president.
If that's the case, I'm going to do what Ellen DeGeneres did. I'm going to move to England.
I'm not going to move to England. I'm just going to mock NBC. So what does it say? Yesterday, a tweet about the Golden Globes and Oprah Winfrey was sent by a third-party agency for NBC Entertainment in real time during the broadcast. It is in reference to a joke made during the monologue and not meant to be a political statement. We have since removed the tweet. Right. Okay.
So anyway, I'm at the first trial. They're playing these tapes, and they give you these transcript books so you can see in writing what you're going to actually hear when they play the tape. And by then, I'd gotten used to trying to know what was coming so I can brace myself, And, they pick all the unflattering stuff. But none of it's criminal. And if you add it, you put the rest of the calls in there, it fills out the context.
Of course.
So in this one particular call, I asked my lawyer, Quinlan's his name. Hey, Quinlan, what's the rule again on residency requirements? How long do you have to live in Illinois to be a senator? And he said, just 1 day. And you got to be 30 years old, and you can be a naturalized citizen or American-born citizen. So I say, because we were not finding the black military hero, why doesn't somebody go to California, ask Halle Berry if she'd like to be a United States senator? She comes to Illinois for 1 day, I'll make her a senator, and maybe I could fuck her. I'm joking around.
Right.
Well, they play this, in court.
Oh, boy.
And there's my wife sitting right there,
Oh, boy.
And I look ahead, and I'm looking at the clock, and there's like 10 minutes to go before noon when the judge is going to recess for lunch. And I'm thinking if I could just get there before they play this tape, I could at least kind of prepare her for what's coming.
Right.
And I made it. And so I tapped her on the knee, and I kind of showed her the book, and I said, look, I was just kidding. And her reaction was, what are you, 16?
Well, that's the same thing as like the grab them by the pussy comment. It's like,
exactly.
Guys talk like that. It doesn't mean they mean it. Guys talk like that all the time for fun. It's not, you could say it's misogynist, it's this, it's just shit talking. It's what guys do, and they know that the other person doesn't mean it. That's why it's funny to say.
Yeah, and let's face it, most of us like that stuff.
Yeah, we
right?
like joking around about stuff like that.
No doubt.
It's fun.
And
Maybe
the
I can fuck
object.
her, and everybody would laugh. Ah! And even if you never did anything or never even intended to do anything, you'd say something like that to get a rise out of your friends.
So years would go by, and I'm sitting in prison. I'm making one of my nightly calls home, and my wife's on the phone. And that Billy Bush tape came out. What a slimy thing to do to Trump, right? It comes out, and everybody's writing him off as a president. He can't win, pressured by his party to get out of the race. And my wife was, offended by it, and she's telling me, you have 2 young daughters. How could you possibly defend this? And I said, let me take you back to a day in court, okay? Before you judge somebody else, look at your own husband. And I told her about the Halle Berry thing and what I said. And I said, this is, as you explained it. And I think people have to realize that so many of these things that are taken out of context are taken out of context for a reason. It is to mislead the public and prejudice them against things.
And that the context aspect of it is very important because there's such a difference between a statement and someone tapping a phone while people are having a private conversation and talking shit.
Mm-hmm.
There's just, and did they read it or play it when you said that?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People talk shit. Like, you can't pretend that that's what they actually mean. You know, it's one thing if you get someone planning a crime, but everyone knows that people talk that way. You just pretend they don't because they don't in a professional setting.
Yes. Look, I spent 2,896 days because of what they did and how they did it.
So if
In
you
prison.
just went along with whatever they asked and didn't ask for any political bartering, you think nothing would have come of this?
Oh, no, I would have. Oh, you mean just political
If
barter?
you did, if they came to you and said Obama would like you to put this person in as senator, if you just agreed to it, you think none of this would have happened?
No, I think they were going to do whatever they did to get me no matter what.
Why?
Because they had spent so much time and money, 5 years.
But why did they do that? Why'd they come after you?
I think that I think part of it has to do with a lot of it has to do with the actual U.S. attorney. His name is Patrick Fitzgerald. He and James Comey are real close. It's this sort of FBI, DOJ type people who've become part of today's Department of Justice, and they feel like they're a power center of their own right, that they're this new political place in American government. They are so dangerous to our freedoms in this country. I think it was largely that. He had convicted the previous governor, Republican governor, Ryan, of crimes that he had committed when he was the Secretary of State of Illinois. And so now he could be the first guy in history to get 2 straight governors. And I think it was that. I think he wanted to leverage Obama to keep him in office so he could finish the job and get me after investing 5 years, and he came up with nothing. That's why they invented the crimes from those conversations. And if anybody doubts this, and I fully understand why people would, the question I'd ask people is, well, you tell me what side is lying. The side that refuses to play 98% of the tapes that they made, or the guy that's saying play them all, warts and all. There's unflattering calls where I say stupid things or, I'm angry or whatever the case may be, or I'm using profanity. They already played those. But play those tapes. What are you hiding? The side that's hiding is the side that's lying. And they're hiding it to this day. They covered up all those tapes. They wouldn't even let me play them in court in the second trial, even though they promised that I could play them if I testified at the second trial. And so I got up on the stand, Joe, and the judge had promised on the 20th of May, 2011. I thought this was the day I'd be vindicated. He said, look, if he agrees to testify, he can play the tapes to corroborate his testimony. Because I was a lawyer and I was also a prosecutor at the state level, Cook County prosecutor. And I know how the system works, and I know that if you get up there and you're saying certain things, and one side has tapes of you saying something and you're saying stuff, but you don't have tapes to corroborate what you're saying, the prosecutor is going to simply tell the jury in closing argument, go back at the jury room and see how many times you hear what he testified to corroborated by those tapes. And if you don't find any tapes, then you know who's lying. I knew this. But when the judge said I can do it on the record, I felt beautiful. I'll testify. And then we'll play the tapes to back up my testimony. So I get up there, I testify. Then when it's time to play the tapes, the judge won't allow them. It was a setup. And then the prosecutor does exactly what I knew they would do if those tapes weren't heard. He says, go back into the jury room and see how many times he talked about the Madigan deal, because that was the big deal I was about to make before they arrested me. You won't hear a single tape, even though there were 102 conversations on that subject. They were all covered up, and the jury didn't know those tapes existed. It was a total fucking frame-up in a rigged criminal justice system, in a court that was rigged. And that's today's America. And why? What happened to Trump is so important. They did it to him in those different courts where they got the convictions for things that weren't crimes.
Yeah, there's multiple things that have changed our timeline, and one of the big ones is him being elected, because that means they dropped those cases and all that weaponizing of the justice system didn't work. If it did work, that is such an insanely dangerous precedent to set. When you see things like the documents case or the real estate case, which is the most disgusting one, pretending that Mar-a-Lago, that somehow or another someone was a victim because he overvalued Mar-a-Lago, even though he paid all those loans back and the banks profited from it. There was no victim at all.
Hi, I'm Gemini. I can help with things like brainstorming, explaining something you don't quite understand, or even just chat about something.
Right, so just hit Master 1, I mean Grandmaster 1, so touched it, awesome. Yeah, I did it, but I still want to actually get Grandmaster 1 on this one, so I'm going to keep going until I do. But yeah, so I'm trying to get top 250 in the world on the aim training now, so yeah, I'm already in top 400 or 300-ish. Yeah, I'm top 300-ish because I'm like top 140 on this one, 450 on this one, and 300 and no 290. I forgot. But yeah, all right, I'm gonna keep going. And sure.
and yet they fine him this fucking insane amount of money and try to say that Mar-a-Lago was worth $18 million. That is just such a slap in the face of anybody that understands. First of all, anybody that understands property values in that area. That's preposterous to say that place is only $18 million. It's a fucking enormous property and the most expensive real estate in the United States, or one of the most expensive places for real estate. And there was just so many of these cases over and over and over again that just right in everyone's face, and very little pushback. No pushback from the media at all. They went along with it as if these 34 felonies for a bookkeeping error that is essentially a misdemeanor that's past the statute of limitations, and now you're marking it up as a felony, but you can't even identify the felony. The whole thing is madness. And all these news organizations, because they don't like Trump, are going along with this insanely dangerous precedent. Because if that goes through, well, what happens if Republicans get into office and you have some new Democrat that you really love, and this Democrat is a real challenge and a threat to the Republican, and they start doing the same fucking shit that you did? Is that what you want? You want us to be a banana republic just because you don't like Trump? I mean, it just shows you how many people were willing to sacrifice all of their ethics, all the things that they believe in, what the Bill of Rights stands for, what the Constitution stands for. Fuck all that. We don't want this guy to win. Throw it all away. And then you throw everything away. And then we have no freedom of speech. We have no nothing. It's all gone. The whole thing is so mind-boggling how short-sighted people are in the name of wanting their side to win.
Well said. I don't want to sound like an egomaniac, but I got to tell you, they got away with it with me, and they got emboldened then to say, we can do it to a Democratic governor, the fifth largest state in America. We can get away with it. Non-fucking crimes that we make up shit and call them certain things that are sexy sounding, sale of the Senate seat. That eventually was reversed by the appellate court. They could never uphold that unlawful standard. 3 fundraising requests where there was no quid pro quo. I got convicted of that. None of it was personal corruption. Nobody said I even took a penny. And they gave me 14 years because I was fighting against them and exposing them. So it started, I really believe, with me. And they got away with it with me, and it's some of the same people. Comey, Fitzgerald, those people were doing it to Trump with Russia collusion stuff. Yeah. And some of the same people then went on and have been doing it as part of a, get this, organized political campaign that came right out of the Oval Office, out of the Democratic National Committee, the DNC, into the DOJ. They've corrupted the Department of Justice and the FBI, and they've corrupted the rule of law and the Constitution, and this is no small thing. And just because Trump won, because the American people are beginning to get it, doesn't mean we're safe. The Trump administration, God willing, is going to do something very serious about this. If there's anything that this administration can do to make America great again, is to protect our rights and our freedoms, and to hold the people that do this accountable and make an example of them. Not to be vengeful, but because it's just, and because it sends a message to these unaccountable prosecutors who have no check and balance, that if they do this and frame innocent people, they're going to be treated the same way as a dirty cop who plants a murder weapon to frame an innocent man.
As they should be.
Look at this guy, Andrew Weissman, on CNN. He's got a big spot at CNN, the legal expert. You ever see this guy?
No.
Anyway, he was a former U.S. attorney, and he made his name by destroying Arthur Andersen, a company that had all these people working for him, in an accounting company nationwide, one of the biggest accounting firms in America. He used a standard that wasn't lawful to get convictions on them. Eventually, the United States Supreme Court took the case, and they ruled 9-0, unanimous, that the standard that Weissman used to prosecute Arthur Andersen was an unlawful standard. But the damage was done. That company went bankrupt. All those people lost their jobs. And this Andrew Weissman gets promoted and becomes this legal expert and scholar on CNN. That guy, Fitzgerald, Comey, and people who do this, Jack Smith, Alvin Bragg, Letitia James, they ought to go right to fucking jail.
What were they accusing this company of?
Obstruction of justice, that they were destroying records and stuff. And that would have been a crime had they done it after they'd been subpoenaed. But they weren't subpoenaed. They had a right to do whatever they wanted with their records before anybody compelled them to produce them. It was obstruction of justice.
And what was the accusation? Like, what were they trying to get them on?
Saying that they were destroying documents and evidence.
About what, though?
About the accounting work for Enron, which was a real scandal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw The Smartest Men in the Room.
Yep.
That documentary, like, jeez. Anybody who doesn't believe in conspiracies, watch that.
Jeff Skilling was in the prison with me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he got a big sentence, and then eventually they found prosecutorial wrongdoing, and he was able to reduce it down from something like 26 years to 14. But he was there with me, along with Smelly and Socks and Mr. B and V and G and all kinds of
I bet
guys.
you met a lot of characters.
All kinds. I'm writing a book about it. You know, it's a story that starts with one president, ends with another. And there's a governor in prison with gangster disciples, Sinaloa cartel drug dealers, pedophiles. That's what I meant to tell you. I was in there with something like 400 pedophiles.
Jesus.
Murderers, bank robbers.
What do they do with the pedophiles in jail?
They're a protected class in prison because everybody would fuck them up because of the nature of a lot of their crimes. Some of them are worse than others. Some are like this guy that got pardoned by Biden, which is unbelievable, where they're into child pornography. But some were far worse than that. They harmed children directly.
So how do they protect these people?
You get more than canceled if you even say something bad to them. You can't offend them. You can't call them a name.
What?
That's their way of policing the other inmates who hate them and resent them.
Really?
Mm.
So they're protected.
Yes.
Because the thing that people always loved about pedophiles going to jail is like, oh, there's going to be some jail justice.
Well, there is, notwithstanding their policy, the BOP's policy. The guy that was Jared, the guy, subway guy, he ended up going to the same prison I was in after I worked my way out of that higher security prison, the one behind the barbed wire fence, and got to a camp. Jared got to my prison because it's a pedophile. It's a prison that has a lot of pedophiles. Out of the 950 guys, roughly, that I was in prison with there were about 300 to 400 pedophiles. And then there were drug dealers, bank robbers, some guys have committed murder. There were 2% white collar, Skilling one of them, one governor, me, right? But those pedophiles, the sex offenders, you can't call them pedophiles. And the derogatory term...
You're not allowed to call them pedophiles?
Can't call them pedophiles, and you can't call them chomos. That's the inside prison name for these guys. It's a
Chomo?
Chomo. So I'm there day 2 in prison. I got 14 years ahead of me. They gave me a 14-year sentence. I mean, Trump pulled me out of there after 8. And I'm in there second day. As you can imagine, I write about this in the book. I mean, it's a hard experience, a long, hard journey. It's heartbreaking in so many ways for me and my family, and hard. But, I'm learning the ropes. I got all my fellow inmates there. And I'm hearing this phrase, this term called, chomos, fucking chomo, that guy, he's a chomo. They'd say that, and I'd say, what's that? And they told me. And so I was with one of my, the case manager or somebody. They were giving me more of the information I needed for the stuff I had to learn as a new inmate. And I mentioned, so who are these chumos? And she goes, you can't say that. It's not chumo. And she whispered it, it's chomo. But you can't say that. That's strictly forbidden here. If you say that, you'll go to the SHU. Now, so what's that? I have to ask her. Well, the SHU was Special Housing Unit, SHU. The vernacular was SHU, solitary confinement. And the way they police the inmates and punish them to varying degrees is you get thrown in solitary confinement. So if you just say chomo, that'll land you in solitary confinement.
For how long?
Maybe a week.
Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so crazy that they protect pedophiles.
There are lots of VPNs out there at all different price points. Many of them are even free. So, should you use a free VPN? In this video, we'll break down the advantages and the disadvantages of free VPNs to help you make an informed decision. But first, let's talk for a moment about how all VPNs work, both free and paid.
When you connect to a VPN, you get a different IP address that is shared by many other people, which masks your real identity and location. Besides the privacy benefits, this can also allow you to access sites and services that may be restricted where you are. Your traffic goes through an encrypted tunnel that should, in theory, keep it secure and private.
If your goal in using a VPN is just to temporarily change your IP address, and privacy isn't really...
Yeah. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm too liberal or something, but they have to. Because if left to their own devices, these guys would get so fucked up by the general population who are outraged by their crimes and are also outraged by the fact that a lot of them got special treatment in their sentencing. So you see this guy that Biden just pardoned or gave clemency to. Let's hope it was just clemency and not a pardon, my God. But these sex offenders are getting lighter sentences than the drug dealers or the bank robbers. And if you look at a system of punishment that's supposed to be just and fair and hopefully always tempered with mercy, you'd like to think that there's equal application of the law and that there's some sort of fairness, and that when you measure the victims of the certain crimes, that should be a part of the sentencing. And so drug dealers would argue a lot of it nonviolent, and they're right. Their stuff was nonviolent. These guys really harmed children, the ones that touched children, not the ones who just looked at the pornography.
How did they justify you being in this high security prison? Like, why would they put you in with pedophiles and murderers and gangbangers? Why would they do that? Obviously to squeeze you, but how do they pass that through?
You get anybody who gets a sentence of over 10 years has to do time, and you can't be in a camp. So, certain people can't be in camps. For example, any kind of violent offender cannot be in a camp. Pedophiles cannot be in a camp. That's good. And camps don't have, fences. There's not iron gates that lock you in. I mean, I went from a 50,000 square foot governor's mansion to a 6 foot by 8 foot prison cell. I mean, it's real prison like in the movies. Those iron gates shut you in, and you're restricted in your movements. And you're with some badass guys, I mean, they're interesting guys, and I met a lot of guys I really liked. But they did it because they purposely gave me a sentence above 10 years to force me to go into a shithole prison and to try to not just squeeze me, but to punish me. And the punishment was because I had the temerity to fight back. Who was this guy? He was only twice elected governor of the fifth largest state to challenge us. And I fought back. And, frankly, the beauty of it is that had I not fought back the way I did, Trump would have never known me. He saw me on television fighting back. I mean, I fought back in ways that predated him, the way he does. And it wasn't by design. It was just I felt like, Jesus, I didn't do anything wrong. And they know it. This is politics. And, this is wrong, bad for our country. I can't give into this. And by the way, if I'm right, they are criminals. I have to fight back. And so I was on all these TV shows, everything. And Trump saw me on the David Letterman show, I think. And by the way, when they do this to you and they arrest you like they did, they arrested me at 6 o'clock in the morning in my house. And it was a super sensational press conference. It was international news. Back then in December of 2008, there were two assholes. The two biggest assholes in the world were me and Bernie Madoff, because they arrested him like a day or two after me. You remember this?
Wow.
And it was, I had to fight back, and so I was. But you can't make a living. They threw me out of office, and you learn who your friends are in politics, and not a single one of them. They all ran for the hills to protect themselves. They all voted to throw you out, and because the politics of it was bad at that time.
Boy, that's a time where podcasts would have come in handy.
Yes.
Imagine you can go on a podcast and just lay out the whole case and exactly what's going on, and even play tapes.
Can't play tapes. I'll tell you why.
You could never, because they were recorded?
Because they put a court seal on it. They arrested me. They play me saying this is fucking gold and I'm not giving it up for nothing. But they don't play what comes after it.
Right.
Right? If it says I want $100 million in a Swiss bank account, which, by the way, the current governor Pritzker had called me to ask me to make him senator because he inherited $1 billion. That's the one you'd sell it to.
Right.
But if I said that would be a crime. But there was none of that. They covered that up. So they go to court a couple of days after I'm arrested, and they go before their judge, and they get a sealed order. They put a gag on it. So the tapes cannot be played publicly in court, and I can't talk about what's on those tapes.
Wow.
Unless it comes from my independent recollection. I can't release them. It's a crime.
You can't talk about what's on those tapes unless it comes from your own personal recollection.
Right.
So you can
Yes.
talk about the tapes. You just can't play them.
Correct.
And you can't quote them.
I can quote what I remember personally, and I
Right.
remember some of it, of course.
But at least you could have laid out your version of it so people could hear
correct.
it. And it would put pressure on them.
And I was doing it, not on podcasts, but I was doing it on the Today Show, Good Morning America, CBS Morning, Nightline, Dateline, all the shows.
Is it's such a short segment.
That's right, exactly.
You don't have enough time to lay out the environment, how it works, what really goes on in politics, how what's normal for how these deals are made.
Well said. Yes, exactly right.
So this person that Obama wanted, whatever happened to that person?
She became like a top advisor for Obama in the White House. Now, there's a school of thought, there's a theory that's plausible. Obama publicly said he did not send this labor guy to me. But Balanoff, the emissary, in 2 trials testified twice under oath that Obama called him. Obama then was interviewed by the FBI the day or 2 after I was arrested. And if you lie to the FBI, they call them 302s, these interviews, it's a crime. But I've learned that the FBI is really the FBI. And you sit down like I did stupidly, you talk to these people, they say you lied and you say they lied. Who are you going to believe if you're a jury, right? It's a big mistake to ever trust them, to be honest. So my advice to anybody out there who's getting chased by the FBI, don't talk to them. And I thought they were the good guys, so I sat down and talked to them. Well, Obama talked to them. And every defendant is entitled to relevant evidence that could help him or her defend themselves against criminal prosecution. But to this day, they would never give us Obama's 302s. So did Obama really send this guy, like that guy testified to? Or did Obama not do it like he publicly said he did? He said he didn't do it. So somebody's lying. Somebody broke a law. Either Balanoff's lying and he perjured himself at 2 trials, or Obama is lying on those FBI 302s, or he lied, which is a crime, or he lied to the public, which all too often politicians do all the time, and Obama's one of them who does it a lot.
He does it a lot.
Get quick access to Gemini without switching apps, only on Android. So when food envy strikes, Gemini has you covered. And now, save over £350 on the Google Pixel 9 Pro XL. The fun never ends with unlimited social media on Foxy Mobile.
Balanoff, this guy, what would be his motivation for saying that Obama wanted you to do that?
The theory is, among a lot of political insiders who know how it works, that he was an emissary for Rahm Emanuel, who became Obama's chief of staff. He was a member of Congress. I had a pretty good relationship with him. He's all over the FBI tapes with me.
And so that Obama never said anything about it, but Rahm Emanuel said something to him.
Rahm Emanuel asked him to do it and instructed him to tell him that Barack himself had asked him to come.
This is just a theory.
A theory. And the theory is plausible in that what would be the motivation for Rahm to do that was that as the new chief of staff with Obama, and in the power game of politics, which is something he knows real well, and I know, is people want to be close to the king. And Valerie Jarrett was Michelle Obama's best friend, and she was a threat to the influence of Rahm and others. And if you get her kicked upstairs to the U.S. Senate, she won't be in Rahm's way to have more of a voice and more say in Obama, in the direction of Obama's administration. Now, this is a theory. It's a theory.
Interesting theory.
Mm-hmm.
So what's day one like in prison?
Mm-hmm. I write about that in detail in my book. It's like chapter 3 or chapter 4.
Have you published this book yet?
No, it's coming out. It's going to come out, I hope, by spring. I hope I get it done. I'm almost done.
You have a publisher and everything?
So it's interesting, the politics of the publishing companies. I've pre-sold about over 8,000 already. I haven't even put it out for pre-sale yet. I'm about to do it. Blago something books, Rod Blago books or something. We haven't done it yet, but I've pre-sold some to people, friends and others, about 8,000 of them already. So it's helped me be able to self-publish and create my own little publishing company. And the reason I'm compelled to do it is because I've gone to some of the New York publishing houses, and they are so anti-Trump that if you say something nice about Trump, and he comes across really well in my book. I was on his show. He was great to me. He's a kind guy. I'll tell you stories about him if you want. He pulled me out of there. I love Donald Trump for a lot of reasons. Of course, because he gave my daughters their father back. So I write well about him. He comes across very well. Obama doesn't come across so good. He doesn't come across as evil, but he comes across as a very selfish, very, calculating politician who missed an opportunity to be a great president, instead divided our country, and who's a snake and an ingrate, and who sold out his friend Tony Resco, who bought him a lot. This guy bought him a lot next to a mansion that he bought after he was elected to the United States Senate. Obama's, at that time, only had $750,000 they could afford for a mansion. They wanted to buy the adjoining lot in this real upper-class neighborhood called Kenwood, Hyde Park neighborhood in Chicago, by Obama's library. And they couldn't afford the other lot, so he went to his friend Resco. Obama did. And Resco's a kind-hearted person, and he wants to help his friend Obama. So he pays the list price, like $750,000 for the lot. The Obamas paid less for the lot with the improvement on it, the big mansion. Obama now is running for president. That comes out. He's got to fix his political problem. He goes to Resco, and he says, I got to put a fence between the lot and the mansion. So I could explain to the media that it's your lot, not mine, right? And he asks for a wrought iron fence, not just any old fence, not a chain link fence. He wants a wrought iron fence because it matches the mansion. And then he hands Resco a bill for $13,000 for the wrought iron fence. And then when Resco suffers for 3 years in solitary confinement because he won't lie about Obama or me, he sends a letter to the federal sentencing judge saying they're squeezing him to say stuff about both of us. Makes the front page of the Chicago Tribune in August 2008. That he won't do it. They put him in solitary confinement for 3 years. For 3 years, he saw the sun 1 hour a day. And then when he got out of there, he tries to do a burp beep. And he faints because he's so skinny and so weak after 3 years of that. And this fucking Obama did nothing to help him.
Jesus.
It's unbelievable. So opposite of the kind of guy Trump is. I mean, I didn't do anything for Trump, and he helped me. He just saw something wrong. And I think he kind of liked me on Celebrity Apprentice. He liked the way I was fighting back. I know that. But he fired me on that show and freed me from prison. He's historic. He fired and freed the same guy. Even Lincoln didn't do that.
Day one, do you have hope it's going to be overturned in an appeal? Like, what are you thinking when you get in there?
Yeah, boy, that's a great question. Look, the hardest period during this whole thing was the months after the conviction to the day that you surrender, because now you know you're going away, and you're fearful it's going to be long. In fact, a couple of months before the sentence came down, I'm jogging, I'm running through the neighborhoods, and I see, that was newspapers back then. It's a newspaper box, front page, big colored picture of me. I see it. I'm running past it. I saw the headline briefly. I came back running in place. I see it. 30 years to life. The prosecutors are asking for 30 years to life on me.
Life.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
I never took a penny. They don't even say I took a penny. It was all talk about politics. So I got home faster. That sort of stuff quickens your pace a little bit,
Yeah.
But that period was the hardest. The moment I stepped into prison, I write in my book that one advantage of crossing the threshold into prison was that with every tick of the clock, you're 1 second closer to this nightmare, this Kafka's nightmare finally being over. 1 second closer to coming home to your daughters and to your wife, even though it might be 14 years and one less second. You know what I mean? But you're at least it's starting now.
Yeah.
You've hit the bottom and now you're climbing back up, just from a time point of view. But that first day, I'll work backwards. I'll never forget the first night after that long, long day that I went through. The media was covering me like I was O.J. Simpson. They were at my house at 5:30 in the morning when I kissed my little girls goodbye. My little Annie Banani was 8 years old at the time. She's in her pajamas and she hugs and squeezes me. And my daughter Amy, she was a sophomore in high school. She was 15. And we're all in the foyer. It's all dark because you got all these media trucks around your house. We live in a neighborhood, a normal neighborhood, just not gated. And they're all over the place. And so they look into your house. So we had to keep the lights off. Kiss my wife goodbye, my 2 daughters. The hardest thing I've ever did was saying goodbye to them. But you got to be strong for them. And you can't show those assholes in the media that you're dying inside. So you got to be strong when you step out. There's all kinds of film footage of that when I left. And there's a helicopter that follows me, the news helicopter from my house all the way to O'Hare Airport in Chicago. Like I was O.J. Simpson in that white Bronco. I called the chapter my white Bronco moment. And then when I got at the airport, there was this big gaggle of media there. And then when I get on the plane, these motherfuckers are on the plane. They bought tickets. So I can't even give it a second to think about what just happened, me saying goodbye to my family. And I'll be gone for worst case scenario, 14 years. But if I behave myself, it'll be 12 and a half years, right? Good behavior. And then I land in Denver. And they're there. And so I'm trying to leave the plane. They're all waiting there at the gate. And then the people in Denver were really nice at the airline. I think it was United Airlines. And they got me out a side door. And they had a car waiting. So I was able to leave. And for a moment, I thought I was away from the media as I'm about to drive to prison. But no, they caught us. They caught up with us. And I got there a little bit early to prison. So I told one of my lawyers who was driving me, you know what? We're like a half an hour early. I'm already giving him 14 years. I don't want to give him 30 minutes more. Let's stop for a cup of coffee or something. So we went to this little restaurant, a little fast food place called Freddy's in Denver, the Denver area, Littleton, Colorado. And it was really surreal because, people knew who I was and they were really warm and loving. I'm signing autographs. You'd never know. I'm about to go to prison for 14 years. And then the time came to walk in. And I learned later that Trump was watching this because it was all live on television. And he had tweeted about it that day. I mean, I got a million reasons why I love Donald Trump. I was so alone. Everybody of prominence in politics and government and in the media, were calling me all these nasty things. And here's Trump, the only guy who had like some authority and had a following, was the only guy saying like positive things about me. They were compassionate. He wasn't necessarily saying, he was saying that I denied it and I wasn't, I'm entitled to a, presumption of innocence. But there was compassion with Trump. And he tweets that day. I learned later, I didn't know it then, but I learned when I came home that he tweeted that I see him walking into prison, gets 14 years, murderers and rapists get 4 years. Do you think this is justice? I don't. Just a loyal guy to a guy that was on his show. Because I don't really know him that well. But to me says a lot about who he is as a person. But then I walked in, and I get greeted by all these inmates, and people ask me, were you afraid? I wasn't afraid of anything. My life was so, beaten down by what they did. I was so disillusioned. I was angry. There was bitterness, but I was mostly heartbroken and sad and missing my children, fearful of my children, my wife. They were left alone. I couldn't protect them. People knew where we lived. The media made sure that everybody saw where we lived because they were always in front of our house. I was worried about their safety. I knew I had all those years to do. And now I'm in prison, and all these guys are watching me coming into their world on live television. So I had two things going for me in terms of how my stock with the fellow inmates. Number one, I was a quasi, I was a celebrity inmate. They just saw me coming into prison. Nobody walks into prison live TV. And the bigger part, the more important part was, I got what they call a 14-piece. That's the vernacular of how inmates talk. He got a 14-piece. Means he didn't snitch on anybody. See, anybody who gets a long sentence means they're getting punished because they wouldn't talk about anybody. The guys who walk in with light sentences become immediately suspect by the inmates. It's the culture there as snitches. And they hate the snitches. Snitches are bitches who get stitches, right? That's what they say.
Sure.
So I walked in there and I had immediate street cred with those guys. And they were nice to me. They actually gathered together what little means they had and went to the commissary to get me necessities for my first week: toothbrush, toothpaste, shower shoes, just a very nice, kind thing to, me. These were drug dealers and bank robbers and, tough guys, all tatted up, tough guys. Their gangs would be tatted on their heads and stuff or on their, biceps.
Did you have to join a gang?
I write about how the correctional officers wanted me to actually join the white group, the Aryan Brotherhood guys.
The correctional officers, why did they want you to do it?
So in one of the chapters, the early chapters, it's I wasn't in prison for 27 hours before I broke my first prison rule. And they called me, inmate Blagojevich, report to the lieutenant's office. And they explained to me, this was my first full day. My second day there. It was after my first full day when I walked in. And I got a chance to see the prison yard. And I walked around the yard with a couple of black guys, both from Illinois, one from the south side of Chicago, gangbanger, drug dealer. Name was Slim. And another guy named Walter Hill from East St. Louis, Illinois. And I was their governor. And they were really nice to me. And we walked around the track and we were talking about, and I was interested in the facilities. One of the things I was determined to do in prison was to work out a lot and to read a lot. And eventually I read the Bible a lot, like if you want to talk about that at some point, because that was so meaningful to me. But they called me in the next day because the word got out that I was walking the track with black guys. And it was explained to me by the authorities there that prison's a very segregated place, that the unwritten policy in order to keep order is that people need to be part of their own cars. They call the euphemism for gangs in prison is cars. What car do you ride in? And that they thought that for my own safety, that number one, I shouldn't be, walking around with black guys. I need to be part of a car, and I need to join the white car and go see these two guys, Cole and Sadness. Sandness. His name was. I thought it was Sadness too. Exactly. Because I'm looking around. Who's Sadness? Who's Sadness? I'm looking for Sadness, right? His name was Sandness, and Cole was the leader. I think he was from Texas. And they told me that I should go see them. And so out of respect for the police officers, the correctional officers, I said, okay, I'll go see them. But I made it clear to them, listen, I don't give a fuck. Because they told me, look, when you get into a conflict with somebody, and it's inevitable, because you're in prison with a bunch of guys for a long time, there's going to be all kinds of disputes. You want the window open, the other guy wants it closed. You didn't put the weight back in the weight room like he would have wanted. There's all kinds of shit that's going to have the conflicts that develop between guys living close like that. The way we keep order is we keep the races and the different ethnic groups separated. They all become part of their individual cars. You sit with them in a commissary. I mean, at the cafeteria, they call it the chow hall. You work out with them. You walk the track with them. You're polite to the other groups, but you don't really get friendly with them. Because if you have a conflict with somebody, your car will protect you, especially if it becomes a conflict with somebody from another race or another group of people. In the prison I was in, there were a lot of black guys, a lot of Latinos, a lot of guys from Mexico, seen a lot of drug cartel people, a lot of Native Americans. There were Pacific Islanders, and of course white guys and sex offenders. They were their own group. And so they all pretty much rode in their own cars, their separate cars. But I told them, look, I don't fear anybody. If somebody wants to fucking kill me here, in some ways, or put me out of my misery, I'm not going to be doing some, kind of thing like that. It's racist. I'm not doing that. Whoever's nice to me, I'm going to be nice to them. And I'll respect your rules. I won't sit with the black guys or with any Latino guys. I'll sit with the white guys. But I'm not going to, unless you're ordering me to telling me I can't walk with those guys or talk to these guys, I'm going to keep doing it. And they say, well, we can't do that because this is an unwritten way that we operate and keep order in prison. And then they told me something which I respected. They said, look, you're not in the real world here anymore. This is not a place where you could be a civil rights advocate or an activist, a civil rights activist. This is prison. You don't have the same rights here that you have out there. We can't order you not to have relationships or conversations with people from another race. But we can't order you to stop doing stuff that could be counterproductive to us keeping safety. So if you're going to sit with somebody outside your race in the chow hall, that's a direct affront to us. And there are measures that we can take to make sure that you don't do those sorts of things. And I respected the fact that they said it was to keep order, and it was the culture, and pretty much everybody in the prison system accepts it anyway. Eventually, I sat with some of the black guys as time went by, and we actually made an older black guy by the name of Mr. B. He was originally from Chicago and from Detroit. He was like the most respected inmate. He got a 25-year sentence. He looked like Morgan Freeman, the actor. He was a lot like him, actually. Very mature, responsible. He was the guy a lot of the guys went to for their legal questions because he knew everything. And a real nice man and a gentle man. And by the time I got there, he had already done like 20-something years. So he was close to going home. And I'd stay up late at night with him talking in the dormitory portion of the prison where I was first before I got my cell. But it was important to him that before he left, after 20-something years, that he could actually sit at the chow hall with a white guy. And he liked me because I was, from Chicago. And so we did that one day. And I thought it was good. I was there probably a year and a half by the time we did that. And I sat there, and everybody looked at us. We're sitting there. I'm sitting with the black table. And then this great movement for civil disobedience and civil rights petered out. No one gave a fuck.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, it didn't matter at all.
Hi, I'm Joe Delaney. Today we're going to talk about what's the fastest way to get to a 10% body fat and still look and feel.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, was it because that guy was so respected?
Yeah, I think that was a lot of it. And, not everybody likes you. Some people really dislike it, and there were guys in prison who really didn't like me. But for the most part, I had a lot of, I had low approval ratings after I got arrested and before, as they were investigating me when I was governor, but I had pretty high approval ratings in prison with my fellow inmates.
So how did you get into the Bible? Because that was a big part of your conversation with Tucker.
Yeah. Well, so that first night, when the stark reality really hit me that first night, when around 10 o'clock at night, I hear this big boom. And then you hear the gates shutting because they were now locking you in. It's all iron and it's loud. Buck. And then the lights go down. Then the lights are out. Now suddenly you're swallowed up in blackness and darkness. And we're locked in. iron bars. You can't get out. And here I am with all these prisoners and inmates, and I just left my family at 5:30 in the morning. I'm not going home tonight or tomorrow night or next week or next month or next year, right? God willing, I win my appeal, but that might be 3 years. But even that, I was fearful after seeing the criminal justice system, how rigged it was. Deep down, I knew I was a dead man. I knew that from the beginning when they did what they did. I just felt like I had to fight.
Do you think there's anything you could have done that would have gotten you out of all of this?
I could have pled guilty and got less of a sentence. There's no doubt about that.
But what about if you just, when they came to you with that senator, if you said, sure, we'll hook that up?
No. I don't think that was.
They were still coming for you.
No, and they wanted me to snitch on Obama, and they arrested me at 6 in the morning, and I read about that too, in my house. SWAT teams, 24-member SWAT team around my house. I'm the sitting governor of the 5th largest state in America. I've got a security detail of my own. But if 4 hours later while I'm in their custody, it's good cop time, and they're not being nice to me. You're not a bad guy. We hear all these tapes. You're just a product of Chicago politics. We think you can help us. We'd like you to talk about the Obama. We know he wanted to make a deal with you. Stuff like that, they're telling me. It was clear what they wanted to do. And I said, look, I didn't do anything wrong. And as far as I know, he didn't either. There's really nothing to talk about. And then their mood changed, and they sent me to another facility, and they put me in this little cell. And they had me next to this angry guy that was all fucked up on PCP or something. He was like a raging, wild animal to send me a message, And I think they were never going to go after Obama. But what they wanted to do was they wanted to go to him and say, I was willing to cooperate against Obama, and then leverage that and have Obama then tell him, look, just leave us alone. Let us get this guy. Keep us in office when you get sworn in on January 20th. Don't bring in new U.S. attorneys. Don't bring Democratic U.S. attorneys in. Keep us Bush U.S. attorneys here. And you stay out of this, and we'll leave you alone. That's what I think they did.
So it's a lot of chess.
Yes.
There's a lot of moves and counter moves, and people are used as pawns.
Correct. They're political power centers. Here's the danger to the American people and to our democracy. They're not supposed to be that. They're supposed to do justice. They're supposed to go after real crimes. They're not supposed to be a political power center.
Right.
Democrats, Republicans, independents, libertarians, yes. House members, Senate members, the executive branch presidents, yes. The Supreme Court and the courts, yes. Checks and balances. Founding fathers had the wisdom to create a system like that because they know the corruptibility of man. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So they divided power. That's the beauty and genius of what they did in this country. They did not foresee coming out of the executive branch would be this tumor, this cancer, that really started picking up steam in the 1920s, federal law enforcement, and that it would grow, and that the tactics and the methods they used to go after Al Capone, or later on, Carlos Escobar and El Chapo and people like that they would actually use against governors and presidents. They didn't foresee that. The problem is, as a practical matter, because they have such power, the politicians are scared shitless of them. They don't want to stand up to them because they're afraid these people will trump up shit against them and just make shit up or get something they might have done and made it bigger. So it's very
everybody
hard.
knows how the game is played, so everybody has to play the game.
Correct. And then when you're the one on the wrong end of it, all your friends in politics, they run for the hills, they abandon you, and then all of a sudden, they're kissing your ass the day before you're arrested, and the next day they're maligning the shit out of you.
Sounds like Hollywood.
Is that right?
Isn't it kind of the same thing? I mean, that's what they do whenever anybody gets in trouble in Hollywood.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's just cowards. There's a lot of cowards, and a lot of people have a reason to be cowards. It's fearful. They're scared. It's a dangerous system, especially the justice system. It seems very dangerous. And this is not to malign good people, because I know people. I've met people in the FBI. I met great people in the CIA. I know them. They're great people. It's just what you were saying. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, and when people get into positions of power and influence, and this chess game starts getting played, they can make all sorts of rationalizations if there's no checks and balances. This is why there has to be checks and balances, and there has to be oversight to keep people from their own devices, to keep people from their own horrible instincts that we have as human beings, especially if you've done some shady shit because other people have done some shady shit, and that's how everybody sort of worked their way up the ladder, and then all of a sudden you get to a position where, like, hey, you're going to have to do something that you really don't agree with, but this is how the game is played, and then next thing you know,
right,
Rod's in jail.
Yeah, it's like your chief of staff and your governor's lawyer and all your friends people that worked with you and got rich on you.
Yeah.
That choice is, I have to look at my little boy who's 3 years old and his future, or do I try to defend my boss?
Right, of course.
And they make the decision, understandably, for their families.
Yeah, well, and I think a lot of people go into, whether it's politics or law enforcement or into the federal government, there's a lot of people that go into it with very good intentions, but then you see over time they get corrupted by the environment that they're in.
That's right. They become part of a buddy system. It happens with politicians all the time. You get elected back home in Austin, Texas, and then you go to Washington. You get co-opted by the system because you're young and you don't really know, or you're new and you don't know. And they show you the ropes, and the ropes are controlled by that deep state, that establishment, of the long-term members of Congress, the people in the different agencies, the staffers, and it's a whole different world there, and it's basically them against us. There is a deep state in state government, federal government. It's really almost...
Even in law enforcement. I mean, especially corrupt law enforcement. Did you ever see that documentary? What is it? District 75? Is it Precinct 75?
I think it's the 5-7.
The 5-7. Is that what it is? The 7-5 or the 5-7? There's a gentleman named Mike Dowd. We had him on the podcast as well. And, 7-5. On first day, he's a cop. He watches the cops kill a guy. And, they essentially say to him, he jumped, right? And, he's like, okay, he jumped. It's like one of those situations where, like, okay, I guess this is this business that I'm a part of now. I wanted to be a cop. Now I'm a cop.
Yeah.
And then he runs with it. Next thing you know, he's selling drugs and kidnapping people. It's a fucking crazy documentary. He's a fun guy. I mean, it's obviously did terrible things, went to jail, but the documentary is so fucking crazy.
What's it called?
The 7-5, right? The 5-7? 7-5.
7-5.
Jeez, why
Okay.
can't? What am I? You just told me. That's it.
Oh, there it
That's
is.
the documentary. Michael Dowd.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. It's a really good documentary, and you just realize, like, Jesus. Obviously, the cocaine crisis in Miami is another great example of that. And one of the best documentaries about that is Cocaine Cowboys. Fantastic documentary.
Yeah.
I can't recommend it enough. One graduating class of the police academy in Miami, they all either went to jail or were murdered. The entire graduating class. That's how corrupt it was.
Yeah.
It was just off the charts. Cocaine and money everywhere, chaos and murder everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see, that here again, the stuff we're talking about, it's so important that this justice system gets reformed. I'm so excited about the fact that Trump, the people he's picking, Pam Bondi, he's a great person, he's got a good record, Patel, because if we don't trust the criminal justice system, when you tell me a story about those dirty cops, and I'm sure that's absolutely what they were, and that those who prosecuted them were right to do it.
Oh, they definitely were.
Yeah.
They were dirty cops.
But what if you don't trust those prosecutors?
Right.
Right?
Right.
Suddenly the whole
Right.
system breaks down. You can't trust anything.
Right.
So much at stake in this. I failed to tell you what that first night was like, and that first night, and I just should wrap it up very quickly. But there I was in this darkness and so all alone and so heartbroken, so fearful and worried about my kids and my wife and what it was like for them, imagining in my mind my wife comforting my daughters as if I had died, because I kind of did. I was gone. They were going to grow up without their father.
Right.
So all of that's going through my mind. And then I reached for the Bible, that my wife gave me to leave for prison, to take with me to prison. They don't let you bring anything else in, but they'll let you bring the Bible in. I've always had a belief in God. I always believed in prayer. I was raised in the Serbian Orthodox Christian church. But I never read the Bible. I was just so busy trying to get ahead in life. I had to go out and make campaign promises, give speeches, kiss babies, shake hands, raise money. I tried Genesis. I'd get stuck in Genesis. So-and-so's begetting so-and-so. I'll put this on the side. I can't. Right. Now suddenly here I am in this deep fucking dark valley, and I'm facing 14 years of this. I'm so alone. I'm not going to fuck around with Genesis or Deuteronomy or Leviticus or any of that stuff. I'm going to something right away that might give me some hope. And I went to the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. And then I kept reading the Psalms, and I know the story of David, and I associate myself with him. I know I get criticized and maligned by people in the media for saying I'm like David. I'm not saying I'm not. I'm not saying I am. I'm simply saying I looked at his example, and I got strength from that, because he was being chased by Saul, and he's in the caves for like 11 years. They're chasing him. I'm thinking he endured that. Maybe there's hope. And I'd read his Psalms, because they're just prayers to God is what they are from him. And they were helpful to me. So I kept reading, and I went to Isaiah and the fiery furnace of affliction, and how adversity and hard times is God's way of testing us. It can make us stronger and better. We learned through those hard lessons, through the fire of hard times. And of course, then eventually the Gospels. And the best story of all, in my mind, as a Christian, is the story of Jesus. And here he is in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's saying to God, because he's so afraid, because he knows what's coming, what they're going to do to him. And he says, "Oh, Father, please lift this cup from me." I mean, I get choked up just thinking about this. And he says, "But no, God, no, Father, not my will, your will." And then he steels himself for what he's got to face, takes on all the suffering that he goes through, and the humiliation, everything else. So I read it every day for 2,896 days, and I know it in a way I never knew it before. And I love it, and it brought me so much closer to God. And there were moments, as crazy as this sounds, and I'm not running for anything, so I'm not here to try to win Christian evangelical votes or anything. But there were moments years into the process, not those first early years, because they were so hard. But after I was there for year 6, year 7, and I'd read the Bible like that every day, and I was really working out, and I was reading a lot of other books, and I'd get visits maybe a couple times. In the beginning, it was like 2 or 3 times a year in the beginning. And then as time went by, it was hard for our daughters. And I would encourage them not to come because they were in school. And we were hopeful that we'd get justice in the courts. And only another few more months, the appellate court will come through. Don't come. So now suddenly I'm seeing less and less of them. But I'd have moments. And I was lucky because I was in Colorado, which is a beautiful place with great weather and blue skies and snow-capped foothills of the Rockies. That's where the prison was. And then when it would rain, there'd be rainbows. I believe these are godly things. And I'd sometimes get done with a run or something, and I'd walk that track, stretching a little bit, and I'd see that beautiful rainbow, and I could almost feel the presence of God. I know it sounds like bullshit for people who don't know that, but when you've been beaten down so much and you're so fucking alone, I looked for God, and I really believe I found him. And I feel like I'm at a place now, I'm grateful in a weird way for that experience. I wish it never happened, and I have bitterness still. And I hate the motherfuckers that did it to me, and I know I'm not supposed to hate them. I'm supposed to forgive them. I'm not that good a Christian. I hate the motherfuckers. They belong in jail. But I have to say that experience, reading the Bible that way, maybe it serves a higher purpose. Maybe in some ways, it was good for me.
Well, I think you got the most out of that.
It's great having your own receptionist. But even the best can only answer one call at a time. Missed and queued calls mean unhappy customers and lost business. That's where Moneypenny comes in. We give you a lead Moneypenny receptionist and small supporting team to answer calls, even at the same time, either supporting or filling in for your in-house reception staff. Multiple callers, day or night. Never miss an opportunity with Moneypenny in your corner. Talk to us today.
Would you believe me if I told you that coffee could be one of the healthiest things in our diets? But the problem is, most coffees are over-roasted or badly handled until they've lost up to 90% of their healthiest compounds. Meet Exhale, the UK's first coffee sourced, roasted and 9 times independently tested for health. It's drank daily by 25,000 people, and it's now one of the highest rated coffees on Trustpilot. Hi, I'm Alex.
Horrific situation in that regard. Right, and sometimes you have to experience horrific tragedy to experience incredible love. That's a weird thing to think of, but I think this battle that we have constantly with good and evil, and it's a real thing, and that it's sometimes in your darkest, deepest moments is when you recognize a truth. There's something there that we all, every culture believes in a higher power. And it's very strange, isn't it? Like almost every culture, almost every culture has some sort of belief system about a higher power. It's something you could say You could be very cynical, and you could say that's just human beings looking for order in an orderless, chaotic place, and that your creativity and your your inquisitive nature rather, leads you to constantly search for a daddy in the sky. You could say that, but I've talked to too many people that have had these sort of, like you've had these breakthrough moments in life where you come into contact with something by opening yourself up to it. And it's so cynical just to disregard that. Everybody wants to pretend that they're smarter than they really are. It's a terrible trait that we all have. And that prevents you from, and especially secular people, atheists, people that are like acknowledged atheists, prevents you from even considering the idea that there's something to this that you're not getting. And your simple little mind, your desire for order, and to look at this and go, no, you just live and you die. Well, you don't really know. And you should probably listen to some people that have had profound experiences, because there's been a lot of them, and there's been a lot of them throughout human history. And to just completely dismiss them as all nonsense, it's just like, that's such a cynical perspective on human beings. And then there's also the fact that, look, I'm not saying bad things haven't been done in the name of religion, because they most certainly have.
Right.
People have been slaughtered, wars have been started, people have been demonized and othered to the point where you're allowed to kill them because they believe the wrong thing. It's not universally good, but it's a scaffolding for ethics and morals that I think shapes society in a way that's not really possible with just anarchy. You know, you need law and order. You need something you believe in. That's what keeps us together. I mean, you could be a brilliant, intelligent person who's just unusually compassionate and live your whole life without religion and still be an excellent contributor to society. But God, the people that I've met, and one of the things about coming to Texas is I meet so many avowed Christians, so many like really proud and intelligent and vocal religious people. And they're some of the nicest people like you could ever meet. Like a real Christian. Like I've met some real Christians, like this, my friend Alan, who runs a homeless, rehabilitation community here in Austin. It's like the guy's just a real Christian. I mean, he lives with these people.
That's right.
He's just like really walking the walk. He's not doing it for money. He doesn't have a mega church. He doesn't drive a Rolls Royce. He's a regular person who really is acting like the Christian from the Bible, like the best example of a Christian from the Bible.
Bible talks about false prophets because people are human nature. It's
yeah,
constant.
There's a lot of us that are false prophets.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, some of these, we call them in prison jailhouse Jesuses. Some of these guys,
oh sure,
you know, they'd walk around with their Bible, tote their Bible, and they were stealing, you know, and rip you off.
We talk about that. We talked about that in terms of psychedelics the other day. There's spiritual narcissism. I think the same sort of spiritual narcissism that encompasses these preachers that talk in front of stadiums full of people and fly private jets and drive Rolls Royces. That's the same sort of thing as a guru who wants to take you to the jungle to give you drugs, or, you know, someone who wants you to join their sex cult, or someone who wants you to to join their yoga thing where no one works anymore and you all grow your own food and this is your guru. You know, there's a shit ton of documentaries on these folks.
No doubt.
That's the false prophet.
Yes.
It's a danger. It's a real danger that we have in looking for someone smarter than us. It's a normal pattern of behavior from tribal societies. All tribal societies had the wisest person who was the leader. This is the person that everybody trusted. He's the guy with the most scars. He knows where the food is. He knows how to get the fuck away from the enemies. He knows how to keep order, and he's reasonable in how he governs the village. And until someone overthrows him, that's your guy. And we have this hierarchy that we look for in everything. You know, we really do. We look for it in all sorts of things. And if we find it in a false prophet, we'll go with it. I bought a building out here. You know, my podcast or my comedy club is in a place called the Ritz Theater. It's this beautiful theater from 1927. But before that, I had bought another building that was owned by a cult. It was a building called the One World Theater. I didn't buy it. I was under contract for it. I spent a bunch of money and got out of it because I watched the documentary on the cult. And I was like, oh, my God. It was a guy who was a gay porn star and a hypnotist who started this cult in West Hollywood, and then after Waco popped off, this guy had to escape from West Hollywood because they were looking for him because, you know, the Cult Awareness Network, and they started, you know, after Waco, they're like, Jesus Christ, how many of these cults are out there?
Yeah.
They were targeting this guy. So he changed his name, moved to Austin, and built this theater. And the cult had already disbanded a bunch, and my friend Ron White, the comedian, told me, because he had performed it, you turned it into a concert venue, this theater that this guy had his cult followers build him so he could dance in front of them. It's beautiful 300-seat theater, gorgeous place. And this is the same thing. It's just a person who convinced all these other people that he had the answers, and he was a hypnotist, so he's really good at fucking with people and really good at like talking people into certain states of mind, and they all believed in him, and they wasted decades of their life. That's literally in the Bible. That's a false prophet.
That's right. By the way, congratulations on your magnificent success.
Thank you very much.
And you're a comedian too, huh?
Yeah,
No
I
shit.
do a lot of different things.
Yeah. Wow. You know, I was stuck when you were on the rise. So when I came home, I didn't know who you were. I hope you don't kick me out of the room.
No, I don't care. I'm happy now that people don't know who I am.
Yeah.
When I can talk to someone they don't know who I am, I'm like, this is great.
But it wasn't long before I got home. I would say within a couple of days that I got this thing called an iPhone. What's this? And this guy, Joe Rogan, had this big deal on this podcast. I said, Joe who? And they told me, and it's remarkable.
That's crazy. So you went to jail before iPhones?
Yeah.
Wow. What a fascinating blip in time that is, if you really look at it in terms of impactfulness, like a piece of technology that completely changed the world.
Yeah.
That might be one of the most, that's bigger than the laptop, I think. I think it's the most impactful. I think the invention of the iPhone is probably one of the most impactful things human beings have ever created. Not necessarily in a great way, but sometimes in a great way.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no.
There's a lot of great things about it, but the invention of the smartphone, for all good or bad, you missed it, and that's really crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Can I go back just briefly to the spiritual end of it
You can
all?
go wherever you want.
I just want to say that, look, I consider myself, I think I have testicular virility. You know what I mean? I think I can.
You got balls.
Yeah, I really do. I know I do.
Yeah.
And I have I have a certain toughness to me. But I'll tell you something. I wasn't strong enough to get through prison by myself. I needed God. And it was that, my love for my daughters and my wife, I could never possibly give, and I had to survive and somehow find my way home, however long it might take. And I had to do it in a way where I could be so strong and be constructive and actually plant seeds for a better life later on, where whatever I did, my little girls can see that, God forbid, when tough times come, because it comes to all of us, how do you deal with those hard times? Do you embrace the adversity, try to turn it into something good, or do you just give into it? And so that gave me the purpose I needed in prison. And I spent a lot of time not just reading the Bible, but reading all kinds of books, because you got time. I mean, you got a lot of time. I read a book 3 times, and I talked about this to Tucker Carlson, called Man's Search for Meaning, by a guy named Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor who had gone through things a million times worse than anything I went through. He lost his wife, his family, through genocide. He was at Auschwitz and survived it. But he said that the last of the human freedoms, after everything's been taken from you, the last of the human freedoms is our freedom to choose our own attitude in any given set of circumstances. And that if you could find a why to live, you could find the how. And my why was my little girls and my wife. No matter how hard this was going to be, I had to survive this, I had to endure it, and I needed to do it in a way where it would be the best possible way to do it that could help raise my daughters from afar. Because I didn't raise them, my daughter did. I mean, my wife raised our children, our little girls. And so that gave me real purpose. And I had those moments when despair would creep in. It's very natural. I mean, there are a lot of blue moments, as you can imagine. I could never, ever, ever let myself get so down that I would not be, active in any given day. I had to go out there and, run those miles and lift the weights, do push-ups, whatever it was, read those books, do the stuff I would write about. Because I love my daughters, and I'm doing it for them. That was my purpose. I'm not running for governor anymore. I'm not trying to be, successful in the real world, because I'm not in it anymore. My success I'll measure by whether or not I'm strong and tough and I'm productive, because I'm doing this for my kids. Does that make sense?
It does. Do you think the experience of being in jail, as horrible as it is, made you a better person?
I like to think that it did. I think I'm more humble. I think. I was never good at that.
Sometimes that's what bites people in the ass. I always say that about Trump. Like, that's also why he kept running, even though everybody was coming after him. Like, you have to be a very particular type of person that has all those legal cases thrown at him. All those if he lost and he lost those cases and then he lost the run for presidency, he very well might wind up in jail. They can't have him at 82 years old trying again. They're not interested in, because he became more popular when he was gone than when he was president. And people sort of, like, towards the end of the 4 years of Biden had, like, completely reversed. So many of my friends, me included, had completely reversed how they looked at him.
Yeah.
And then also a lot of it was getting exposed to watching how this propaganda machine marches in step all throughout the media with everything. Me in particular, having it turn on me during the COVID years for being someone who got healthy without taking the vaccine, and they wanted to get me removed from Spotify. I'm like, this is crazy. This is wild to watch. And that was, minor league stuff compared to what happened to him, and certainly compared to what happened to you. But I think people are less likely to believe mainstream narratives now. And we're so fortunate we have other ways, like Tucker's show, where I saw you, like things that aren't approved. Look, when Tucker was on Fox News, I'm sure there was a lot of things that he wanted to cover that he couldn't. Like, there's no way when he was on Fox News he could have interviewed that guy who says he blew Obama.
Right.
There's no fucking way.
Yeah.
This guy, Tucker Carlson, is such a wild boy. He's got a guy on for, like, how long was that podcast? Find out how long the Tucker Carlson podcast was with the guy who claims he blew Obama. Because just even being able to sustain a conversation with a guy who wants to talk about smoking crack and blowing Obama, how many minutes can you do? I want to know. Like, I'd be hard pressed to think I could squeeze an hour out of that guy. Like, what the fuck are you going to talk about? How long is that podcast? 42 minutes. All right, he hung in there as long as he could. But my point is, I'm not standing up for him having that guy on. I'm not saying that was a good thing. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, that's what he wanted to do. I watched a little of it.
Yeah.
That's what Tucker. So that's Tucker with no one telling him what to do. The Tucker Carlson show. He does whatever he wants. He interviews whoever he wants. He comes up with the questions he wants. He has real conversations that didn't fucking exist before. And now that it does exist, and a guy like Tucker, who was the #1 guy in news to begin with, now he's independent, along with independent journalists like Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi and Barry Weiss and Glenn Greenwald. You have all these people that are honest. And they're honest. They're always honest. They're always giving you the full version of the truth, and it's spread like wildfire. And then you look at the narratives that you see in mainstream media, and like, you're leaving so much out. You're not talking about that. You're not talking about why people were upset. You're not talking about what started it. You're not talking about the government intervention that was behind it all in the first place. And that was a planned organization. And they leave out everything because that's not what they're supposed to do. What they're supposed to do is sell as many stories as they can, but stay within a very confined narrative.
Exactly right.
And most of that narrative is heavily progressive, left-leaning, until that's not popular anymore. And when that falls out of favor, folks, when that becomes non-profitable, they're going to go the other way. The country will move more right. It'll be more right in the media, even, if it becomes profitable.
Well, that's why what you're doing, I'm not here to kiss your ass, but I am grateful for being on your show. It's very nice of you to have me so I can talk about my stuff. But no, this is what you're doing, and Tucker Carlson and so many of you podcasters who are out there offering another place for people to get information in the free exchange of ideas in a free country that cherishes free speech supposedly, but no longer does. And
I think most people do.
People do, but the government and the power centers and the
It's just when it's
media.
not convenient for them.
There you go.
And the fact that there's these rules, we should have rules that apply across the board if we want to progress as a society. And one of those rules, the most important rule, the reason why it's the First Amendment, you have to be able to talk about things.
Right.
You have to be.
Right.
You're going to get things wrong. You're going to be poorly informed. You're going to have biased opinions. Hopefully, someone who is more informed has a more objective and more honest opinion, more accurate opinion, and then hopefully you're strong enough that resonates with you, and you can put your ego beside you and go, you know what? This is me wanting to be right. This is my ego. The correct thing is what these people are saying. Let me tell you why I thought what I thought and how I was wrong, and apologize. And that doesn't mean you're weak. It just means you, like everyone else in the world, sometimes is wrong about things. Like, I have a friend of mine. I don't want to say his name. Very, very nice guy. One of the smartest fucking people I know. And I have these fascinating conversations with him. And then one day, he tried to explain to me why something works in the UFC, why something else doesn't work anymore. I go, stop. Because stop. You're going to ruin my opinion of you. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Don't say this. Don't say this to me.
Right.
I've been working for the UFC for 25 fucking years. Don't say this to me. You don't know what you're saying. You're saying nonsense. He's like, really? I go, yes. This is total nonsense. Here's an example why it's nonsense. This guy violates that rule. No one can, you can't tell. There's a specific group of movements that are all designed to fuck people up. Any one pattern can be successful given the individual and his abilities and his competency in whatever skill set that is. There's no one skill set. You can't run around saying one skill set trumps all. It doesn't work like that anymore.
That's interesting.
This is brilliant people. So this is a brilliant person talking out of his ass.
Because they're people. They have their own prejudices and their biases, right?
Also, they like to be smart. Smart people like to be smart.
Exactly. They want to be the smartest guy in the world.
Yeah, always. They're smart about some things. What is that? There's like a...
Fast delivery. Festive entertainment.
A term for that, where like really intelligent people erroneously believe they're intelligent about everything.
Conceited ignorance.
It's like that,
Yeah.
right?
Socrates called it conceited ignorance. And by the way, they made him drink the hemlock and kill him because supposedly he was corrupting the youth of Athens in Greece.
He probably was too.
But he was also challenging conventional thinking.
Yes, of course.
Which is what we're talking about, which is necessary in a free society.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dunning-Kruger effect, that's right.
Okay.
Cognitive bias when individuals with high competence in one area overestimate their knowledge and abilities in unrelated fields. Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Well, I don't have that problem.
It's super common with really good people that are very good at things. People that are very good at things, any one thing, like if you're a wizard at basketball, you probably think you're way better at playing pool than you really are. You know, there's there's a lot, like, I'm the fucking man. You know, like if you're a guy who's just cracking home runs every day and someone wants to play ping pong, like, motherfucker, I'll figure this ping pong shit out in about 5 minutes and then I'll start fucking you up. And it's just not true, you know? And there's a lot of people that are really smart people, unfortunately. And this happens with tough people too. Tough people want to pretend they're the only tough person. They all want to pretend that. Everybody has this weird thing where they think they're different than everybody else.
Interesting.
And that's what leads them to be champions, but that is also what makes it incredibly difficult to come back from a devastating loss for some of these guys. So if they fight a guy And, you know, they've been the fucking man for years.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they're in there with this guy and you're like, oh my God, I'm getting hurt right now. I'm getting hurt and I'm probably going to get stopped. And you see it in their eyes. You see they can't believe it's happening. They never envisioned a time where this guy's going to knock them out. And then they're against the cage and you see them getting lit up. And you, in my mind, I'm seeing the sparks in front of their eyes. Because when you get hit, you see sparks. And if you get hit with like a big shot, like you don't know where anybody is for a couple seconds. Your legs aren't working.
Right.
And I'm seeing it in this person that thought they were so good they could fight this other person. They didn't see it the way everybody else saw it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they didn't see that they were past their prime, or they didn't see that this is a bigger weight class, or whatever the variables are that lead to like a devastating loss.
Yeah, like Duran and Hearns in the 80s. The mismatch, the size, and Hearns knocked him out in like the second round.
Well, yeah, that was Tommy Hearns in his prime, man, because you got to realize Duran did go full 12 with Hagler.
Right.
When Hagler was in his prime.
Right.
But Hagler had a respect for Duran that I think almost was unfortunate. Because, like, Duran, for
was too
people
small.
don't know.
He was small compared to
It wasn't
them.
just that. Hagler, in his mind, Duran was like one of the legends.
Yeah, rightfully so.
I mean, the quitting with Sugar Ray Leonard was horrible, and it ruined his reputation. But if you could just take that fight away,
yeah,
and look at his body work. What he did to Ken Buchanan when he was a lightweight.
Right.
People don't even understand. Roberto Duran started out his career at 135 pounds. Went up and won the middleweight title. You have to understand how fucking crazy Roberto Duran was. When he beat Davey Moore, was that super welterweight? It was either 154 or 160. He beat Davey Moore, who was in his fucking prime.
That was in L.A., wasn't it?
I don't know where it was. I remember I watched it on TV.
June 20th, 1980. Duran Leonard in Montreal. Do you remember that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I love Duran. I met Duran once when he was training for that Davey Moore fight in L.A.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying about martial arts and boxing, there's so many life lessons experiencing that in the ring. I'm not here to say that I'm some great fighter like you were, but I fought the Golden Gloves when I was in high school. First time I ever got my name in the Chicago Tribune.
Well, that's
Probably
amazing.
Last time they ever said anything nice about me.
See, that's a hard thing to do.
You learn about life because you're no teammates. It's just you in there.
It's
right.
If you won the Golden Gloves, that is a very.
I didn't win the Golden Gloves. I fought in the Golden Gloves. Yeah.
Even fighting.
Yeah.
Even just getting into the ring, having the courage in your fucking underwear to step through those ropes with those stupid shoes on. And big pads over your head, and you realize you're going to just throw your hands at some other dude who's trying to KO you.
Yeah, exactly. The other dude's trying to kick your ass.
It's such a weird feeling.
How old were you when you started?
I started fighting when I was 15.
And what was the impetus? What got you interested?
Well, I got picked on a lot. I was a small kid, and I was always moving. We were always moving to new neighborhoods.
Oh, yeah.
And we had moved to this new neighborhood. Nobody really hurt me. Like, I'll be real clear about that. I got pushed around a little bit like teenage boys do to each other, but I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. And so I was like, look, I'm not growing. So it's like, what can I do to stop this fear that I have of conflict? I was terrified of like conflict with kids because I did not know what to do. I had no training, no martial arts, and the only sport I'd ever played was baseball. And so I started doing martial arts, and I became obsessed.
Was it Taekwondo?
Yeah. Well, I first started with karate.
Okay.
I was going to this place called Esposito's Karate in Newton, Massachusetts. It might still be there.
Yeah.
He was like the town legend. He was this black belt guy who was awesome, who taught this like very popular school. But it was hard for me to get there. I didn't have a car. I was a kid. And so I would have to take a bus and walk a mile. It was like too much, especially in the winter. But I found this Taekwondo place in Kenmore Square in Boston, and the tee would go right to it. I'd only have to walk a mile to get to the tee, and then I'd get on the tee. So I would do that every day.
The tee is public transportation?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So every day I'd walk a mile, get on the tee.
After school?
After school.
Yeah.
As soon as school's over, I'd go right from my house, I'd grab my gym bag, and I'd go to the gym.
Right.
And I went every day.
Great.
So then, like, when I was in high school, I was traveling around the country fighting in tournaments. It was the weirdest shit. It's like I went from being terrified of fighting to like fighting all the time. Like all the time. We were flying to Ohio, and you know, I couldn't drive. I was 16 at the time. So I was with all these other guys, and most of them were like grown men. And we would all go, and I was competing as a grown man.
GoDaddy Aero is so easy. AI built me a website in minutes. Unlike this website build.
I was competing as a grown man when I was like 15.
What weight class were you?
I won the state championship the first year at 140, but it was way too hard for me to wait the whip. And I was doing it like a moron.
Right.
Like the guys who do it today, they really know what they were doing. I just stopped eating.
Right.
I just stopped eating and stopped drinking water, and then I'd get in the shower and I'd like shadow box in the shower when it was, you know,
I know.
it was steaming hot.
Yeah,
so I was
right.
trying to like drain my body of weight.
Yeah.
And then I'd have to fight that day. By the way, you'd have to fight
Yeah.
the day.
And
you
you're so
won it.
tired. You're.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I won the states 1 year doing that, but I realized like I can't do this anymore. And I also tried being a vegetarian. I tried a bunch of stuff. And then the next year, when I was 18, then I started eating. Then I went up to 150. I think it was 55 or 54. I forget what the weight class was, but it was 50 something. I went up to that, and then I got way better. I was much better.
What was a typical training day like?
Hours.
So when would you do it?
The whole day. It was all day. The moment I would get home from school.
Yeah.
I'd usually eat something real quick, grab my bag.
What would you eat? Like a banana? What would you
I
have?
didn't eat good. I was
Yeah.
retarded. I would eat a bowl of cereal. I was
Yeah,
a kid.
right. Yeah, of course.
And I didn't have a lot of guidance. My parents both worked, so
Yeah,
I
yeah.
fend for myself. Whatever's in the house, I'd eat that, and then I'd get on the tee and head out and go train. And so.
So how much time between when you ate and when you actually got working out?
An hour.
Yeah. So you got while you were traveling, you digesting.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it takes like an hour to get there at least. It takes takes like a half hour to walk, and then 20 minutes on the train. Then
So you
10
got a
minutes on the
trainer there, you got a coach.
Yeah.
You got other guys.
Well, yeah, and then
So-
I started teaching. That was a big thing too.
But what would you do? What would your workout be? Would you?
Well, you would always start up. But mostly we'd start with technique, right? So most of the time you would start with just straight kicks. You would just practice kicks, hone. And you're also warming up, so you go through a whole warm up routine. You'd practice your kicks like mostly just for form. So you'd practice kicks, and then you would practice kicks with specific. They would call it like a one step. Like you would come at me with a thing, and I would practice stepping to the side and countering. You'd practice that way. Then you would do sparring, and we sparred almost every night. And some of the sparring was fucking horrific.
Could we just spar like a rounds?
Yeah.
Like 3-minute rounds?
3-minute rounds,
Yeah.
generally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're sparring, all these people that are bigger than you,
Right.
stronger than you.
Right.
And I was a kid.
Right.
And then you would have heavy bag work. Heavy bag work
Right.
was always at the end. When you were exhausted, you'd work on your power. And then there were some days we just came in and only worked on technique. You didn't spar. Those are good days. You could just only work on your power, like heavy bag work, drills, speed drills, focus mitts. Like you'd have these pads, these paddles that people
course.
hold, and you throw kicks
Yeah.
at the paddles.
Yeah.
And you're just all working on like making it so it just has no telegraph. It just goes off. You're trying to have it just go off like a switch. And so you're just constantly drilling it as if you're competing, and then you'd go on the weekends, you go compete somewhere.
Would you run at all? Do any road work or
I
push-ups?
did,
sit-ups, things
I
like that?
ran, I did, but honestly, I hated running,
Yeah.
and I spent so much time training already that my endurance was fine.
Yeah.
And I would do rounds in the bag. I always felt like rounds in the bag were better
Harder.
endurance anyway,
Yeah.
because that was like what you were gonna actually do.
No doubt.
Other than getting hit,
Of course.
Is like,
But would you do like ab work and stuff, work your core, get that strong?
yeah, I would do sit-ups,
Yeah.
and I would do push-ups, and I'd do chin-ups and shit like
Yeah,
that, but not a
right.
whole lot of things.
Yeah.
Most of it was heavy bag training and sparring.
Yeah.
It was,
That alone is a great workout.
it was quite a while before they started accepting even the idea of weightlifting. A lot of
Right.
for a long time boxers. We were just talking about
No-
this the other day
no
with
weightlifting.
Bert Soren
Go
from
ahead.
Sorenex,
Yeah.
and he was saying that like boxers were told that if they lifted weights,
Right.
they would be really stiff
Right.
until Evander Holyfield came around. And Evander Holyfield kind of changed everybody's opinion of it because he lifted weights, moved up to heavyweight from cruiserweight, and was
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, hey, maybe weightlifting just makes you stronger.
Yeah.
And then now they all do it. It's kind of funny. Like almost all those guys have some kind of strength and conditioning routine now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you do now? What do you to stay in shape? You're addicted to it because it's your lifestyle.
Well,
right?
I think I'm addicted to it for mental health reasons too.
Me too. I know what you mean.
I
Yeah,
think
it's
doing
important.
something difficult is very important, especially if it's like self-administered. You do something really hard and it makes the rest of your day easier. And it also is just, Andrew Huberman has talked about this. There's a specific area of your brain. And when you do uncomfortable things, that area of your brain grows. And when you're sedentary and you're not doing shit, that area of your brain actually shrinks. So it enhances your ability to do difficult things by doing difficult things